All right. Welcome everyone. Fernando Hetiadra here from Ignite Global and Evolving Temple. And I believe many of you already know me. And it's such a great pleasure to share this space together with you. So this is a session focusing on how altered state of consciousness creates transformation. Now, before we dive into anything, I would like to share a little bit of the intention and the excitement why I'm doing this work. As you're aware, this entire 12 month series, 12 lecture series is absolutely complimentary. And I really take a great deal of intention delivering these sessions to you. I prepare a lot, I think a lot about these sessions. The reason is because the kind of transformation altered states of consciousness created in me is something that I couldn't have imagined, I couldn't have dreamed of. And so I want to tell you why I'm standing here or how I'm standing here and what leads me to be doing what I'm really passionately doing. And this starts not even before I was born. It begins with the day that my grandfather decided to commit suicide. So I am from Sri Lanka, and my mom is a when she was just 4 years old, um, they received the news that my grandfather committed suicide, and he was a railway engine driver. This is in 1960s, so you can imagine the status one would have as a railway engineering driver at the time. So my mom and her family with five siblings had a very comfortable life. However, the day that this news reached my grandmom's house, unfortunately, my grandfather's family decided to abandon my mother, abandon the five children and my grandmother. They quite literally were kicked out of the home into destitution, and they had no place to go. They had no resources as they had been fully dependent on my grandfather. So he committed suicide, he passed away, and my family, my grandmother and the five siblings of my mom did not really have time to even process the grief that they experienced with this sudden news. And of course, my grandmother had very little resources to be able to support my mom and her little family. For a single woman who is in mid 20s, I think five children is not a little family, I would say. So unfortunately, my mother and her family at the time were forced into living in a shack right by the side of the railway lines, the same railway lines where my grandfather was driving his railway engines. That's where the story begins. Now, the interesting thing is that I did not know any of these things until I was a child. But even as a child, something that I knew was that there was something wrong with my mother. That at some point she would be extremely loving, extremely kind, extremely caring, which is her natural essence. And at the same time, she would have these chaotic moments. She would have moments that would paralyze me and my sister Lux. There had been many times my mother said to my father in front of us that she would grab both of our hands and push us like this and say, I will go and jump in the river. I will go jump in front of the train. She used to say things like that. And there were very confusing moments for us. Sometimes she was extremely loving, caring, but at the same time, sometimes she's like an angel, and at the same time, sometimes she looks like a devil. So this is the kind of environment me and my sister grew up. As a child, we couldn't really make much sense of her world. So I became very passionate in really learning about what is happening to me, why certain things in life were so difficult for me, for my sister, for my family. So I naturally became really aligned in learning more about psychology, learning more about practices, how we can heal ourselves, grow and access abundance and thrive. And through that journey, I learned to become truly deeply compassionate about my mother. Because of what I learned through my own journey of becoming a psychotherapist is truly recognizing how traumatized my mother was as a 5-year-old young fragile little girl living in unsafe environments, whereas my grandmother had to work and various types of work. She was a clerk at some point. She was washing dishes for someone. She was cleaning someone's house. She was cooking for someone. She was sweeping the floor. She did everything to take care of my mother and the other children. So therefore, the siblings and my mom received very little true care and nurturing. So when a young girl who is very, very small grow up in hostile environment and being unfortunately assaulted, abused repeatedly throughout her childhood, adolescence, even as an adult, I understood that the reason why my mother had these ups and downs, complications, difficulties, challenges, and chaotic behaviors is because of all that what has happened to her. That enabled me to become kinder and more empathetic towards my mother. However, it just didn't help me necessarily to overcome the challenges that I had myself as an adult. As a young child, as an adolescent, I had very little awareness. But as an adult, as I started to deepen my awareness, I noticed that I understand what's happening in my family. I understand the kind of curse and the knot that we all are carrying within ourselves, the traumatic knot from the past. But I did not know how to unlock that. May I invite all of you to reflect for a moment and think about what is a challenge that you have experienced in life that you overcame, or what might be your biggest challenge right now in life that you're trying to overcome. Now, as you're reflecting on this challenge you have in life, I want to share with you one of the challenges that I faced in my life that I struggle a lot with. By the time I was in my early 30s, some days, in order for me to be able to put myself to bed and sleep, I had to drink sometimes half a bottle of vodka. If it's wine, I needed more than one bottle of vodka, maybe two, three bottles of wine very easily. If it is beer, like these tall cans, maybe 15 of them, 20 of them, in order for me to be able to go to bed. So I was severely dependent on alcohol at the time, and I had no way out. I did not know another way. If I didn't drink alcohol, I would not be able to sleep, and the next day will be really bad. And it had been a long term, many, many years of continuation of this dependency. And the psychedelic integration, the altered state of consciousness that I'm going to talk about today, is what the breakthrough for me was. And I'm going to continue to tell that story throughout this session today. And today, I am standing in front of you, telling my story and sharing this knowledge with you is because it created a massive transformation in my life. It enabled me to truly become who I truly longing to become, finding my own authentic self. And I will tell you this much at the very beginning that I haven't touched a bottle of alcohol or even taken a sip of alcohol for, I don't know, many, many years now. I do not say no to anything. If I'm in an event, if someone handed me a glass of champagne, I'll take a sip. I'm not so extreme. I wouldn't drink in that sense because I'm not afraid of drinks anymore. I have so many beautiful bottles that friends have gifted me. It's all in my cupboard. Sometimes I just look at them and sometimes I give it to someone as a gift because I no longer really feel like that I need alcohol anymore in my body. And now I know the kind of damage it does to my body. And what is really powerful about this story is that I didn't have to go into therapy for months. I didn't have to work intensely myself focusing on alcohol addiction. It was cut off, it was removed from my life overnight. So during this whole engagement, I look forward to sharing this story with you. Not just about my story, I'm going to tell you stories about my clients, stories about psychedelic integration research, the new emerging science, and all potential possibilities that I can squeeze into these 12 lecture series that I look forward to sharing with you. Let's begin. So, as I dive in, I would like to Um, so my canvas seemed to not be able to load some of the photos that I put into uh, the presentation, but luckily the text are visible. So I think we should be able to smoothly dive into this presentation, hopefully. All right, so as I get started, I also hope that earlier I mentioned what might be the biggest challenge that you're experiencing in life at the moment, or you may have experienced. I hope, touch wood, that you will also be able to find a solution and overcome that, whichever the challenge that you have in life. All right, colleagues. So today, as I'm still waiting for Canva to open my file, I would like to share with you that our discussion today is going to fully focus on altered states of consciousness, not necessarily looking at it from a scientific perspective yet. Today, I want to tell you many stories like I started. I want to tell stories about public figures that we know. I want to tell some stories about myself. And also, if you any of you have had some experiences, I would love to hear. We would love to hear from you as well. All right. Now that my Canva loaded, I believe now I can share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Oh, this is what okay, there you are. Okay. So today, 20th, 23rd February, we are discussing what is altered state of consciousness. And what we are really trying to do is understanding the states of awareness beyond the ordinary perception and how they shape human experience. So this is going to be our discussion today. And particularly, we will look at altered state of consciousness to understand what this really means. And a quick disclaimer that this dialogue solely intends for education and harm reduction purposes and also aimed for 18 plus audiences. And also, I would like to mention that just like I already did, this session will include some content of trauma, disorders, and some certain mental conditions. So if you are a highly sensitive person, please engage with caution. And I would like to begin this part of our presentation today with this saying of Albert Einstein. So he says, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. Let's think about it. One of the greatest minds that Earth has ever seen, Albert Einstein, for him to say that the stranger, the emotion of being wrapped in awe, if one cannot experience the awe of being wrapped in mysteriousness of our universe, that person is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. It's quite a powerful saying. When someone like Albert Einstein says something like that, I think we need to listen carefully and we need to pay attention to that. So you may be coming from many different backgrounds, and I welcome all of you, regardless of your background. You may be skeptical about possibilities of altered states of consciousness, psychedelic integration. You might have bad experiences, and it's very natural, it can be. So I invite all that inquisitive mind here, all your inquiry. So as you are communicating, feel free to send in your questions in the chat room, and I welcome all kinds of questions. And my invitation to you is, I'm not taking this lightly because someone of caliber of Albert Einstein tells us how important it is to become curious about mysterious. So my invitation to you is to also remain curious and also do your own study. There's a lot of research that is available to us. So feel free to access the resources, research, and also educate yourself. All right. So as you look at this image, you obviously know why I'm sharing this image here. So it kind of give us a feeling of kind of like a out of body, if it resonates with you, some kind of astral projection, astral travel. Let's say something like this. So very often when we use the word altered state of consciousness, one of the very common things people tend to think about is the out of body experiences. And also, sometimes people say that they have had out of body experiences through meditation, near death experiences, uh, deep breathwork practices, kundalini practices, yoga practices, and so on. So there are many ways that we actually can create altered states of consciousness. So today our intention is to go beyond this kind of imagery and truly explore and try to understand the essence of out-of-body experiences, if not altered states of consciousness. So moving on, the first question that I would like to present to you with is like, has any of you experienced an out-of-body experience, but not directly related to psychedelics, right? I believe many of you have had similar altered states of consciousness experience through psychedelics, which we will discuss in a bit. But apart from psychedelics, has any of you experienced an altered state of consciousness through some kind of a practice or spontaneous possibility? If you have, we would love to hear from you. Anyone? All right, maybe it is too early into the session, which is perfectly all right. So as we continue on, if you would like to involve, engage, you can always type things in the chat room as well as you can share with me. And I hear that Geneva has something to share with us. Over to you, Geneva.
Good morning, Fernando, and everyone, or good evening. That's where you are. Um, for me, um, it's been a very recent occurrence, and I I am chalking it up to a perimenopausal kind of thing. At times, I feel so emotionally overwhelmed, but it's almost like I am watching it from outside myself. So I'll be having like a very emotional episode, and I will almost be outside myself watching this episode happen and wanting to like get a hold of myself and just being totally unable to. And so I just surrender to the moment and experience it as fully as possible.
What a great insight, Geneva. So, being able to observe yourself while you're going through these intense emotions and kind of provide the right type of caring during that process. So, it sounds like a great insight. Thank you. It's almost like observing yourself from outside of your psyche, outside of your sense of self, observer from outside. Great insight. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, okay. So let's continue on and let's look at some examples from real world situations. If you feel still warming up to be able to share your insight, feel free to send them in the chat room. All right, so now when you look at this image, you immediately see the kind of sense out of body, looking back at the physical body kind of feeling. An often altered state of consciousness, near death experiences, out of body experiences are attributed to this kind of imagery, this kind of imagery. And in fact, what Geneva just mentioned is also a bit similar. Although she's in a conscious state, she's observing herself. She becomes the observer to herself. So while many of the out of body experiences, altered state of consciousness experiences are attributed to this kind of imagery, I would like to invite you to recognize that this kind of experiences are only the minor number of reporting that we hear from people who go through out of body experiences, if not altered state of consciousness experiences. These mostly tend to be expressed by people, those who go through near death experiences or those who have been in a deep coma or something like that. While it is a type of altered state of consciousness, because in normal sense, in our normal baseline sense of self, and how our sensory organs operate, we are not necessarily able to see ourselves literally from the roof. We can imagine ourselves, but we can't literally see ourselves from the roof, well, unless we have a mirror or something, right? Therefore, this is one type of altered state of consciousness. There are so many different types of altered states that beings can experience. So let's look at a few examples. One of them is Colton Brooper. He was a child, still I think 4-year old child in 2002, he was taken to hospital to for a surgical procedure with its appendicitis. And so he went through that experience, and he comes from a religious background. His father is a pastor, a faith of, I believe, Jesus. Let me say like that because I'm not fully aware. However, the child went through the surgery, procedure went well, everything was fine. So Colton came home as a little boy, 4-year-old. Few months into the recovery process, Colton started saying things like, when I was being operated, I met Jesus. I sat on the lap of the Jesus, and the angels were singing to help me calm down. And then he also said things like, abstract things like the death of the grandfather, his own grandfather, whom he has not met in his life. 10 years before his birth, his grandfather has passed away. He also mentioned about a miscarriage of one of the children before Colton, for that matter, and the parents were very surprised. And he provided great deal of information. Of course, as you know, uh, later he wrote a book as an adult now, and then there was also a movie uh, created out of the story, right? So in this case, Colton had a really very interesting experience based on what he reported. So as you're aware, this information that I'm sharing with you is only what the person reported, right? They are not necessarily peer-reviewed document or scientifically controlled studies. So engage with this content with caution. I'm trying to be as much factful as possible, but at the same time, these are experiences, subjective experiences. So I'm not necessarily saying that it as the truth. Rather, I'm saying it's as an observation, as a story, a case study that we have heard. Because I can't speak on behalf of Carlton for that matter, you would understand me. So, based on his experiences, we clearly could see that as a little child, he reported few things that might not be possible, potentially. And then also, he was able to experience something that seemed to have brought him great deal of comfort, joy. Now, this is Colton's story. And then you may have heard about Anita Murjani. Anita Murjani is a Singaporean born uh, and grew up and lived in Hong Kong. I mean, she's still alive very much. And at some point, um, Anita had um, cancer growing, and she was quite literally drowning in her own fluids. Um, the So she was brought to the hospital, and she was in critical condition, and the doctors pronounced that she will not be able to, she was in the terminal stage, that she wouldn't be able to recover. At some point, she was in a coma for about 1.5 days, about 30 hours. And at that point, the doctors said that she would live for a few more hours, a maximum of a few days. So they kind of gave up on trying to invite her towards the recovery process. And during this period, something very interesting happened. And how did we know this? Interestingly, after these 30 hours of coma, Anita Murjani bounced back. And not only she bounced back, but she started telling what was happening concurrently while she was in this coma. So she said really interesting things. In brief, one side of the story, she said that she saw being in the surgical room. They saw medical staff. She saw the medical staff. And she also says that the medical staff made some inappropriate comments, culturally sensitive comments. And she was able to point that out and even recognize those uh, clinicians who were in the room. And she was able to see her family in different places within the hospital. And she was able to experience her brother flying to Hong Kong before that which they thought that she's going to be expired. She was able to explain these things in great detail. But this wasn't the only thing that she explained. She also had some really interesting ideas. She found this great sense of peace. She was able to disattach from the fear that she has been experiencing for a very long time. She said something like that she was all her operations were fear-based. She was doing everything out of fear. And as she went into this experience, she felt a great deal of comfort, great deal of relief, and great amount of love, pure love, she calls it. And she also has a really beautiful analogy that I really like very much, which I'd like to share with you. She says, imagine if you are in a huge warehouse, a warehouse you don't have a knowing of end to it. It's expanding in every direction. And she says, as a human being, while we are alive on this planet, we have a pen torch. So we open the pen torch and then look at the room everywhere through this pen torch light, that one circle light that will be that will make things visible to us. She said you can experience joy. She says it's almost like you're being in a warehouse of toys, like a little child being in a huge warehouse. Everything is enticing, everything is pleasing, everything is pleasurable, she said. And she said when she was experiencing this out of body experience, if not near death experience, instead of using a pen torch, it was almost like the lights switched on. So the entire, this ever expanding peace, happiness, joy, love was opened up at once. And she was exposed to this magnificent power of love, power of nurturing, caring energy. And then she says that she had a choice whether she's to stay in that realm, whichever the realm that she was in, or whether she was to come back. And she said that she decided to come back. And the main difference now, when she came back, she decided to not bring back the fear into this real world experience, this world experience, let's say, the 3D world experience. So when she arrived back into her body, what doctors noticed was that she started to heal rapidly, very quickly. She started to heal. Once again, very little clinical information is available, but Anita Murjani has written a book. I think it's called Dying to Be Me. And she's a very popular motivational speaker in the fields of near-death experiences, um, consciousness, spirituality, and she's a very well respected person. And then there are also certain experiences that she described, which would be quite literally technically impossible within the scientific frameworks that we know. So this is the story of Anita Murjani. Now, something that we commonly see in this kind of experiences, near-death experiences, especially considering both of these situations, we are starting to notice that when we change our usual state of consciousness, so consciousness is our awareness. We are aware, we are conscious, we are able to perceive the world around us. And we perceive the world around us based on the sensory inputs that we receive. Now, when we change this, how we perceive the world, how we perceive our reality, in certain situations, in certain conditions, we become exposed to truly magnificent possibilities, which could be as powerful as being in a coma and then fully recovering from terminal cancer, for that matter, in that case. So it's worth exploring. And that's, I believe, what Einstein was curious about. While we can measure scientifically our environment, our reality, there are also certain things that we can't fully comprehend, at least yet. I think becoming curious towards it is what is important, we as human beings. So now you heard two stories of naturally induced near-death experiences, which created altered states of consciousness, which they sometimes call near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences. And from now on, we are going to bring our attention to altered states of consciousness. During a near-death experience, the person is not perceiving and experiencing the reality the same way. They are no longer seeing through the eyes. They are no longer feel through their body in a way that our brain is processing sensory. Because when someone is in a coma, if we observed their brain activities under an MRI scan, often we do not, and not in every case, but in cases like this, they do not, the specific areas of our brain responsible for processing specific sensory input is not active. So we recognize that they are not experiencing the consciousness in the same way. During an experience like this, it's altered. So we call it altered states of consciousness. We are not we are not aware the same way. We are not processing, perceiving, receiving information about the reality, baseline reality that we are used to, the same way while we are experiencing a altered state of consciousness. It's altered, it's different, change from our usual perception. That's why we call it altered states of consciousness. Are there possibilities of experiencing our universe in different ways, in altered ways? They are absolutely possible. Now, Colton and Anita both are saying that, and we also have had many experiences with different practices that we can create such states. So to have a overall view to this, I would like to introduce some practices that could create altered states of consciousness. Meditation. As you know, the meditation is being researched over a long period of time. And as we study people who meditate for a long period of time, we notice quite literally their structure of the brain is starting to change, which means their neurological construct of their body is changing. Physiological changes are happening as we meditate. So that means we can measure that scientifically. And also the individuals, those who meditate over a prolonged period of time, they also confirm possibility of having experienced sometimes out-of-body experiences, sometimes altered states of consciousness. And we also know some of the great philosophers, like for an example, Buddha, uh, share many stories of altered states of consciousness, although the language that is being used, the way how the message is being delivered, is not necessarily scientifically framed, considering the ancient times the information was shared, also considering the ancient audiences he was sharing his information with. And also, of course, it is something that is known to us. There are many meditators nowadays in this era who experience altered state of consciousness through meditation, myself included. And I believe you too, some of you for sure. Right. And another possibility is Kundalini, using the energy of our spinal cord and how to manipulate it in the right way in physical ways, we can create altered state of consciousness. And breath work can create altered state of consciousness. Intense breath works, the specific rhythmic breath works. Psychedelics could create breath work, and psychedelics could create altered states of consciousness. And beyond that, a certain way of fasting can create altered states of consciousness. And also certain body movements, physically exhausting movements could create out-of-body experiences. So there are many ways that we actually can create altered states of consciousness. Now, what is interesting is that very often when we aim to gain this kind of experience, um, practices like meditation, Kundalini, breath work, even fasting, they might need to be done over a specific period of time with very high level of discipline and a commitment to be able to experience such realities or different realities for that matter. At the same time, however, as you are starting to already gain a feeling that psychedelic integration is one of the straightforward, direct ways of being able to gain altered states of consciousness experiences. And the good news is that there is a lot of research out there at the moment in the world. For an example, John Hopkins University, at this John Hopkins for Consciousness, and then Imperial College London, Harvard. There are many reputed organizations, institutes are studying the possibilities of psychedelic. So we have abundance of research that is available to us at the moment, focusing on specific psychedelic substances. And the research specifically focuses on the possibilities of plant-based natural psychedelics. So, for an example, magic mushrooms, also magic mushroom is not a plant, the type of fungi, psilocybin fungi. And then we can look at certain other brews like ayahuasca, if you have heard about, and then extraction of DMT. And then we also know LSD, which is the extract of ergot, which is synthesized with the wheat, the fungi that lives in the wheat, for an example, ergot, and so on. So there are many different types of psychedelic substances. Some of them are absolutely natural, not synthetically made. We can ingest them in specific ways and have the specific set and setting, which enables us to experience outer body experiences, if not altered states of consciousness. Continuing on, so let's learn a little bit about psychedelics. So the word psychedelic comes from Greek, and it's a combination between psychedelos or psychedelon. It means psych quite literally translate from Greek to English as either soul or mind, whichever is comfortable for you. And delon translates directly into become visible, if not to manifest. So psychedelic quite literally means soul manifesting or soul becoming visible or mind manifesting, if not mind becoming visible. If I speak for my own experiences, how I would like to express myself is that when I underwent my psychedelic experiences, at some points, the best way I could explain is that for the very first time in my life, I was able to experience the reality and myself not through my sensory perception, not through my sensory perception, which means eyes, ears, taste, temperature, pressure, not with that, but with my own mind. It's almost like I was able to grasp the walls of my inner world, which I cannot touch with my hands. So I would like to say it a bit like this. Should I think I, oh, I think I forgot a slide here, but never mind. I would like to say that altered state of consciousness enable for us to perceive the reality not through the eyes of our body, right? Eyes of our body. The true altered states of consciousness experiences enables us to experience through the eyes of our mind. For a lack of a better word, I use the word eyes here, eyes of the mind. Instead of experiencing the reality through the eyes of our through the physical eyes, we experience the reality with our eyes in our mind, awareness in our mind, consciousness that's possible beyond the sensory perception. So, as I already introduced, psilocybin, which is very commonly which is known as either magic mushrooms or hallucinogenic mushrooms. The scientific term is psilocybin. The reason is that the main psychoactive compound found in magic mushrooms is known as psilocybin. In fact, it's known as psilocin, the actual psychoactive component, which you will get to know in a minute. But when you initially ingest it, you ingest psilocybin, the scientific term for magic mushrooms. An interesting thing is that these little fungi can be quite literally fungi can be found in our environment. It's very common to find in warmer places, uh, humid, wet places, sometimes throughout the year. We can find it in our backyard. And very often, this kind of fungi comes out of the dung of the cows or rhino dung, elephant dung, and so on. Do you see an interesting connection there? If you really come to think of these animals, for an example, the elephant and the cows, we know that they have been very close to our development as human beings through how we developed from hunter-gatherer to becoming farmers. we domesticated these animals. And really interestingly, out of these animals' dung, there comes a tiny fungi, tiny little mushroom. When we ingest it, it changes our reality. It gives us a different perception to who we are and what this universe is about, this reality is about. I find that quite fascinating. If you come to think of the connection between domesticated animals and how this specific fungi is present in their dung. And then if we change our attention a little bit to LSD that I mentioned a minute ago, right? Which is which comes from argot. This is a fungi that lives in the wheat. And do you also see something interesting there? Wheat is wheat used to be and still is one of the main staples for many people. And as we started cultivating wheat, there is a fungi living in it which enables us to also experience altered states of consciousness. It's a purple color, almost like black color little fungi that lives. It just quite literally looks like this wheat flowers are infested by some kind of a fungi. Quite literally it is. And then when we clean up, when we consume the wheat, we have no choice but also to consume some of that argot as well. And that creates this specific altered states of consciousness. So you can imagine ancient civilizations, people before us had these possibilities within their ecosystem all the time. And fortunately for them, or at least my assumption, that it was not stigmatized. It was not made illegal as such up until the recent years because of the political agenda, the greediness of human beings. Now that's for another day. We discuss that another day. But for now, we focus on psilocybin. Now, the reason why I focus on psilocybin is found to be one of the best therapeutic plants that's available, if not fungi that is available, which we could use for altered states of consciousness experiences in a very safe setting. When it is controlled, when the set and setting is right, there's a preparation process, proper integration with harm reduction protocols in place, and then integration process. When we have that right protocol, psilocybin can work as one of the most powerful catalysts, if not, we call it energy medicines that's out there that could help us to expand our awareness through altered states of consciousness. Now, I just mentioned it's one of the safest. So we need to measure this and try to understand a little bit what we mean by safe. So this is the drug harm index in the UK by the Independent Scientific Committee on Drugs that year. And you notice that there's a various types of narcotics are listed here, starting from alcohol all the way to mushrooms. And you notice something that is so commonly available that you can just quite literally walk into a supermarket and buy, like alcohol in most part of the world, poses the highest threat, highest harm of the index of 72 over here in this index. Heroin has a high rank of 55. Cocaine has a high rank of 54. And then you also see a series of impairments that happen, series of harmful elements when we consume these narcotics, for an example. However, if you look at the very end of this curve, you notice the last one is mushroom. So the mushrooms present two types of impairment. One is drug-specific impairment of mental functioning, drug-related impairment of mental functioning. If I'm to simplify that, while we are consuming magic mushrooms in a therapeutic setting, we should not be driving. We should not be making decisions. We should not be going out and about. We should not be in party or raving settings. It's important that we remain in a space that it is safe for us so that this drug-specific impairment, mental impairment, and drug-related mental impairment will be contained. In fact, this impairment we are talking about is truly the state that is going to also create the value for us to expand and transform ourselves. So we are starting to recognize that an innocent mushroom, if was integrated in the right way, it can be valuable and powerful. So moving on, now that we looked at two stories about other people, public figures, I would also like to share with you my own experiences. Then I'd like to link myself back to where I started with the story of my mother, my grandfather, and also me stopping alcohol altogether. Now, when you see this image, what comes up for you? What do you see in this image? Maybe many different interpretations. Now, for me, this experience was very, very special. This was my very first ever psychedelic experience. It was conducted in a therapeutic setting, a very, very safe setting.